So our following segment includes a segment with Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, who is from SOC Films, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy Films, and she will be interviewed by Mr. Humayun Bashir, who is a former IBM country GM. So I'd like to call upon Mr. Humayun Bashir to run this particular segment with Sharmeen.
Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to the lady that has brought laurels to this country.
Thank you.
Well, we have had a very interesting morning. We have heard some very, very heavy subject, some heavy talks. And as Jose Cordero, the keynote speaker, mentioned in the morning, this is a great time. If I quote him, best time to be alive. Mm-hmm. So much is happening around us. So much improvement has happened in society over the last few hundred years. And when he took us on a journey over the next 20, 30 years, we see very interesting scenarios where 3 generations are going to work together. Millennials as well as people like me in the 60s or 50s. You don't call yourself millennial, but
I'm not a millennial.
You're on a borderline. So it's, and what drives millennials is something very different. They are independent, they feel entitled, they want to be recognized, they watch 6 to 8 hours of TV. That's what we learned this morning. And yet they do another 6 hours or 8 hours of internet right through the night. And they are very well informed, and they have new ways of learning, new ways of interacting. So in this session, we thought we will look at something different and learn from you about your journey and how films, how social films, and the path you have adopted, how that is affecting, could affect millennials, and how you could shape. So if you could maybe start with telling us who is Sharmeen Obaid, you know?
Firstly, I employ only millennials.
Okay.
So I'm the oldest person in my company, and I call myself part of Generation X because that's something new that has just been talked about. We're born in the late 70s, and so we're not yet millennials, and I'm quite fine with that. So, well, I would say that I am the eldest of 6 children. I'm a workaholic. I believe very passionately in telling stories. I call myself a storyteller. And I believe that you can use many mediums to tell stories. So I use animation. If any of you have children or have seen Teen Bahadur, which is something that has originated from me and my company, we're venturing into virtual reality. And I really encourage all of you to go out and watch some of these virtual reality films. We have a booth outside because we're harnessing technology to tell stories. And for the first time in Pakistan, we've introduced this kind of technology. So if you, for example, are born and raised in Swat but have never been to Karachi, well, virtual reality can literally take you into Karachi. And so we're introducing this into schools, into colleges. We think this is a way to communicate with younger people. And at the end of the day, I think I'm one of those people who strongly believes in the ethos of Pakistan. Many years ago, in 2007, I co-founded an organization called the Citizens Archive of Pakistan, and its main goal is preserving the voices of the first generation of Pakistanis. We're putting up our first museum on the grounds of Minar-e-Pakistan, which is opening at the end of this year. It's going to be Pakistan's first national history museum, and it's going to really take you through what it meant for the partition generation to leave their homes and come to this new country and the hope that they had. So I'm not one person, I wear many hats, always evolving, but at the end of the day, very passionate about taking this country to the next stage.
Talk to us a little bit about your journey. What motivated you and brought you, because people go and do fashion designing or typical careers or manage their family business, which you could have done. But you chose to carve a path for yourself and create something which was not even there. This didn't properly exist 15 years ago in Pakistan.
So I think it started when I was about 10 years old. I used to attend a school in Sadar, and the car used to go through various different areas. And I remember, I was probably 10 or 11 years old, but I remember the car had stopped at a traffic light. And I remember looking out of the window, and I saw a young girl who looked exactly like my age. Her hand was stretched out, and her nose was pressed against the glass, and she was begging, and she was barefoot. And I remember thinking to myself, why is it that I'm in the car and she's outside? And it was the first time I think I realized that there are a lot of differences in the world. And I began asking difficult questions at home and at school. And my mother, was raising many, many children, and I think she didn't want to answer some of these difficult questions. So, after a few years, she said, you should start writing. So at the age of 14, I started writing for local newspapers. I wrote for Dawn and The News, and my very first article was published when I was 14. At 17, I became an investigative journalist. I did some very big cover stories for Dawn, and that kind of propelled me into thinking about injustices, thinking about privilege, thinking about the fact that we are sitting on this side of the railway tracks because it's the luck of the draw and a flip of a coin, and we could easily be on the other side. And taking that forward in some way to talk about the injustices that I was seeing around me. And I went off to college in the US, and 9/11 happened, and I began to look at my country in a different way. I began to think about what we can do to ensure that this is a country that moves with the rest of the world. And that's how my journey in filmmaking began. I've never studied film, like a really good Pakistani daughter. I studied economics and political science. Okay. And that's how, I guess, I became a filmmaker by accident.
All right, okay. Quite an accident that you went on to make dozens of films. And your works of art, Girl in the River, The Song of Lahore, The Transgenders, the list goes on and on. I did a little bit research, and we chatted earlier. So your award-winning films and the Emmy Award and the Oscar Award, how did you feel when you participated at the competition? What was your focus at that point in time?
Well, when I started my career, I began working in many different countries. So Pakistan is something that I focused on late in my career, actually. I made films in over 10 countries around the world. Many of them have been multi-award winning, with the single purpose of starting difficult conversations. So if you look at the trajectory of films that I've ever done, whether it's in the Philippines or in East Timor or Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria, it's always been about displaced people or about marginalized communities, and how can film spark difficult conversations to bring about change. And so actually the Oscars was a film that I worked on. Saving Face happened by accident also. I had lost my father in 2010, and I had just had a baby, and I remember thinking that I felt very lost in my life, and somebody approached me about doing a film about acid violence. And if any of you have ever met a survivor of acid violence, it is extremely difficult to make a film about them because you have to come to terms with their reality every day. I mean, you have to see them every day, you have to spend time with them, and they can go on with their lives, but the horrific kind of the change on their faces, the bodies, that's something you have to live with as well. And I remember the first time I began filming Saving Face, I remember meeting a woman called Zakia, and her entire left half of the face had been melted. Her husband had threw acid on her face because she had wanted a divorce. And I remember thinking, how can this woman go on with her life every day with a smile on her face? Like, what is it that gives her the courage? People often ask me, why do you make such difficult films? And I say that the people in my films give me the determination and the courage to make these films. Because given the adversity they face, given the problems they face, that they can wake up every morning with a smile on their face and go on with their lives, then those of us who are so privileged in our lives, how can we complain? So it's the people in my films that give me the courage. When the film was nominated for an Academy Award, our single goal was to make sure that the survivors of acid attacks get speedy justice. For any of you who have gone through the Pakistani court systems, you're aware that it takes 3, 4, 5 years for you to get justice. And women who are victims don't want to go to courts for days and days and days on hearings that may or may not materialize. And so one of the direct outcomes of I guess, the press that we received was that the Punjab government made it, Punjab is the province where acid violence is very prominent, said that the survivors could use the courts in the anti-terrorism courts for speedier justice. So really the idea is that we create enough noise about an issue that someone in power does something about it.
So, I mean, it's a huge story, it's a huge success. So your social media or social films have had an impact to change the law and to open some doors for the downtrodden or the affected women in this particular case.
Well, we try. We're not magicians, and there are lots of issues this country has.
Right. So, what role do you think you can? Because you're still many years ahead, mashallah, inshallah, in your journey. You've just started. What changes can social media, films, the SOC bring about in terms of millennials in their lives and the new things that this younger generation wants?
Well, a purpose is very important. So what is our collective purpose in this room? Our collective purpose in this room, despite whichever company we work for, wherever we come from, is to do something that takes this country further. So when you have that kind of ethos, you will automatically attract the kind of people. I mean, in my conversations with so many young people, at the end of the day, the question for them is, what are we getting out of it beyond a paycheck? And what is it that will allow us to sleep better at night? What is it that we can do to do something for the community or the society around us? I know that there are many companies that have excellent CSR programs, engaging with the youth beyond health, education, and that is important, I think, and lots of companies are broadening. I think film plays a very critical role, especially in a country like Pakistan, where you have such low literacy rates. Film can connect with an audience, whether it is in cinemas, whether it is on television. We recently started Pakistan's first mobile cinema. It has just done an entire tour of Sindh. It's going into KP, and we're going into rural communities and small towns where they have no source of entertainment. We're bringing other people's films over there. We're bringing social messages over there. And I think this is the kind of disruption you need to engage with young people, especially those who are not part of the grid. I think those are the kind of things that I feel we're doing and others are also doing that will engage the millennials.
Okay. When I tried to connect with you, it took me a couple of days. You were busy with, you said, 6 films. Ongoing project at the time?
Well, it's a very, very busy week for me because we have...
What are you working on? Can you tell us?
This weekend in Lahore, an immersive installation that I've created called Home 1947 is opening. It is an ode to our grandparents or our parents' generation, what it meant like to leave your home in 1947. It's opening at Alhambra. It's going to come to Karachi in the middle of November at Frere Hall. We also have a series of virtual reality films opening at the Karachi Binale, which are going to be running for the next 2 weeks. And I'm working on a film in America, which is just about to get completed. So there's a lot that's happening.
Okay. So what can we expect? You just mentioned that your team is almost entirely millennials. Mm-hmm. But overall, you must have worked with other age groups, etc. What, in your mind, is the challenge for these 2 or 3 generations to work together? Because the millennials' thinking is very, very different from people my age, for example.
And why is it different?
They are restless. They feel entitled. They think differently.
Perhaps they feel that way because they feel that the country and society has left them down.
Right.
And they were born into a country and they were raised into a country which they didn't recognize, which they felt could have done better. I think there's a lot to be said about the older generations and the investment that they did in Pakistan. This is a country they've inherited. And this might not be the face that they like of the country. And so they're restless because they want to bring about change and they want overnight change. When I first began employing younger people, I would think about why is it that makes them, why do they want instant gratification? Because mainly that's what they're looking
exactly.
for. It's because I think many of them don't like the face that they see of their country and the way they see of society. And so they are eager to bring about this sort of change. And it does, and maybe they have a different way of doing things, but Pakistan has a massive youth group. And we have to really learn very quickly on what their wants and needs are, because their wants and needs are going to dictate the future of this country, and they aren't necessarily the wants and needs of our parents' generation. So I think there needs to be a kind of marrying of two generations, but a lot of their I guess, the way they work is because they want to see change. So if you're noticing on social media, they're speaking out much more. They want social enterprises. They want to invest in nonprofits. They want to volunteer their time. They want to do all of these things that our parents' generation may not have done necessarily. And they do it. And each one of them has an end goal. The end goal to each one of that is to better this country. So I would say let's give them a chance.
Great. So would this lead to maybe another project for you to make some films to bring about change in the older generation?
I think that's my ode at the National Museum, which is my ode to the generation that laid the foundations of this country.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Just a final couple of questions. What kind of technology are you using? I was very impressed to see the virtual reality show. I think it is for the first time that on this scale.
It's the first time that
how do you plan to roll it out, and is it cost effective?
Well, virtual reality is in its early stages right now, so it is available on an app which you can download on Android or iOS. The app is called Within, so you can actually just get a pair of plastic glasses, which don't cost more than 200-300 rupees, and you can experience virtual reality. The rollout is that we rolled it out in the US first. We're rolling it out in different cities across Pakistan at different events. We're targeting over 15,000 students across Pakistan, which we're introducing the virtual reality to. We have just started working on augmented reality. For those of you who don't know what augmented reality is, imagine this table, and you have your phone. And then when you move the phone on top of the table comes alive. There are characters, there are things moving, all kinds of things are happening. So we're investing in augmented reality. The first kind of investment in augmented reality is something that we're trying to do with cartoon characters to tell children stories that have been lost about Pakistan. So the stories maybe your grandparents told you, but were never really formally written, or your parents told you at bedtime. We want parents to be able to take their phone, and as they talk about the stories come alive on the table in front of them. And so we're really trying to use technology in as interactive way as possible, because as you see the next generation, as you said, everybody is always using the phone, everybody's always on the phone. Not that I agree with that at all, but I think that the future lies with the phone.
Future lies with the phone. We spend nearly 150 minutes a day on the phone. We pick up the phone more than 100 times during a day. It's become a part of our life, and it's going to increase with the type of applications, with the type of, interaction, to shop, to entertain, to communicate, everything that goes on with it.
Ariana Huffington has created a sleep bed for the phone. And the sleep bed goes in the house in the evening, and everyone has to put their phones to bed and then go about their day. So I highly recommend that some of us invest in a sleep bed for our phones.
I have seen at some restaurants, they come and give you a box. You put the phone inside, and then everybody's like fish out of water.
Yeah,
how do we interact? It's something very interesting. Just a final question. I would also like the audience later on and after a couple of minutes to interact because I'm sure they have many questions. Looking at the ecosystem of social films and films that bring about change and people that are passionate and sensitive like you, because this requires a certain special kind of individual to pursue this. So what are the other sources of such change in Pakistan besides SOC?
I mean, there are so many organizations and institutions that I personally find that I'm inspired by. TCF, Indus Hospital, there are multiple kind of things. There are young people who are working in technology that are harnessing female doctors that are no longer in the workforce and how they can be brought in the workforce. I mean, there's just countless numbers of things that inspire me. I mean, one of the things that greatly inspires me is the men and women we don't know about. These are the men and women that are working in their communities on a grassroots level and really trying to bring about change. I mean, if you look at the virtual reality films we've done, in Thar, we went and found, and somebody that I really look up to, a man who's bringing water into communities that have never had clean water. And his name won't be on a headline, you won't know about it, he's not going to get major awards for it, but his reward is the fact that the children in the communities around him have clean drinking water. A doctor who's transforming Karachi's emergency wards for children. Those are the kind of stories that when you hear about, that one person can make a difference. For many of us, we wake up in the morning, we read the newspaper, we read about the horrific things that are happening, we put it aside and go about our normal days. The only time we feel the need to talk about them is if it happens to somebody that we know, and then it becomes a reality, and then it hits home that this happened to somebody I know or to my family. But I think before we get to that stage, if more of us began to speak out, if more of us began to believe that speaking out does create change, then I would think that we would be looking at a different outcome in this country.
Thank you. I think with all this background and what we have heard since morning, very interesting times lie ahead. And again, I say, best time to be alive, Dr. Cordero. So I would, at this point, I'd like to open the floor to the audience and invite anyone to ask questions. Sharmeen is here. We have the honor to have her here. So, mics, please. Ji, please.
This is Noman Latif, and I represent the pharmaceutical organization. First of all, thank you very much, what you have done for this country, what you have brought for this country, so thank you very much. My question is that being a very optimistic lady, it's very motivational, but how do you see ourselves, this country and the people living here in next 25, 30 years? So what's your opinion is?
Crystal ball needed.
Crystal ball needed, yes. I think we are a country that is going to face grave issues in the future. The world is changing rapidly around us. You have jobs that are being given to artificial intelligence. You have jobs that are being created. In Pakistan, you have millions of people who don't even have basic degrees, who don't are entering the workforce, that they're not competent enough to get a job. So for me, the single biggest issue in Pakistan is its population and what we're going to do with all these young people who are going to be entering the workforce. Where I find hope is that you have interventions taking place on so many levels, from small towns to villages, people coming back to Pakistan to invest in Pakistan, whether it's people who left Pakistan for a significant amount of time and are coming back, or whether it's people who've simply gone to get an education and are coming back. So I'm finding that people are investing in Pakistan, and that makes me very hopeful. But I do know that we will have major issues simply because of our size.
Okay. Startups is something, because what we discussed in the morning, again I refer to the presentations, that the best scenario is that 3 billion people would be self-employed rather than 1 billion. That is the worst scenario. So people will create their own companies and then create 20, 30 jobs around them. So in Pakistan, if the same formula is followed as per your study, so we are part of that 3 billion best scenario. So we can create a lot of new businesses and new jobs. And they could be in the filmmaking, and because entertainment and other things are part of life, just like eating, breathing, watching TV.
I worry
playing.
that we don't have a population that is equipped to join the workforce in the manner that the rest of the world is equipped. I mean, just a cursory look at our education system will tell you what kind of degrees, what kind of education we're imparting to our next generation. That is what worries me. If we can solve that and our population issue, I think we're golden.
Well, that's a tough call. I think some work is being done in a couple of provinces are doing very well, but others are catching up. There's one more question, couple of more questions here. So let's take two more questions. G, please. Then after that.
Hi.
Salute to you multiple times and again. And congratulations for doing what you're doing, and the ode to our earlier generations who brought us here because of whom we are here. Our generations that I find, we bring them up in a way where we are literally slaughtering their imagination. They come up with weird questions when they're little children, and we don't answer them, or we answer them with our old set of conditionings. The other part is that the handheld devices we are so used to give us everything already. So we are literally doing away with the human potential to imagine. You have this extraordinary grip on what magic media can do. What about, and you're looking at the past, 1947, you're looking at the social ills and what they are doing. Are you also thinking of making something that makes us envision a future? Thank you.
Envision a future. Well, I'm working on an animated series, actually, that talks about the best of Pakistan for children. And so it's a 5-part episode. Each film tells you about an incident that took place, that has already taken place in Pakistan, you may not know about, for children, that could make this country, if you replicate it, could make this country a wonderful place. So I think we're trying to use that as a way to imagine what Pakistan could be and what our potential could be. The films are going to roll out in February of next year. There are 5 films, including one on Eid Isam. And they've been animated specifically for children who are between the ages of 10 and 16. So that, and in a way, we've tried to paint, and each one of the frames has been painted to visualize a very different kind of country. So hopefully that'll be a small contribution.
That's very positive reinforcement with role models, etc. How do you fund all this? Who pays for all this?
Lots of people. So we do a lot of work with many of the companies. We work a lot with, if I could name some of them, I'm happy to name them.
Please.
But we work a lot with Pepsi. We've worked in the past with Coca-Cola. We're working right now with the government of Punjab, with the government of Sindh. We worked with international companies, so HBO, Vice Media, a number of international organizations, including international companies. We've done campaigns for Gucci, so it depends on the project. And we have a lot of Pakistanis who live in the US and in the UK who want to invest in film in Pakistan.
That's very heartening. That's very heartening. Ji, I had promised that gentleman, and then last question will be yours. Ji, please, Mike, the gentleman with the off-white shirt. Right. And then the final question here.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Samir Ulak. I am from K Electric. Actually, I got the answer. I want to know, actually, are you making any plan to produce any film for children? Just like Teen Bahadur, it was a very good animated film.
Thank you. So we have these things. We have Teen Bahadur Part 3 coming out next year. We have all of these short animated films coming out for children. And we're working on an animal film for children that looks at, the story is told by 5 animals that are inherent to Pakistan. So the markhor, crocodile, and so the snow leopard, and they're telling a story about Pakistan. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in animation. That animation those kind of animations could not have been done without some of the companies that exist in Pakistan, because those films are solely funded by companies and by CEOs that have visions.
Wow. One final question here, Ji. Mike here, second table, please. Ji, either. Thank you.
Hi, with
Can you change?
Excuse
can you
me,
change the
my
mic?
name is Abbas and I have a question. You are doing a tremendous job. My question is that whatever you are doing in terms of sending or proliferation of your message, are you getting the kind of response you were expecting, and are you getting the kind of support you had expected and the kind of change you wanted to make? Is this exponentially getting across different segments where you decided to be? Or you feel there is much lot to do? And what should be done? Where are we lacking? How can we support?
Thank you, sir. I think that it's very difficult, actually. For those of us who know very well, many of the issues that I talk about are difficult for people to digest. So, for example, when we made A Girl in the River, which is about honor killings, we did 300 screenings across Pakistan, from small towns and communities to universities. And in many, many areas that we filmed, and there are articles written about this both by Dawn and the News, the men sat on one side, the women sat on the other side. The men cheered on the father that wanted to kill his daughter, and the girls cheered on the girl who had the courage to fight and send them to jail. So there's a long way to go. There's a long, long way to go. But I think that by starting difficult conversations, by at least showing people and opening up their minds to something, that you are hoping to influence their thought process. Do I think that all of what I'm working on will bring about change across the country? No. But maybe by changing one mind at a time, we will accomplish what we're doing, because we have to start somewhere. I mean, if we begin to think about the mammoth problems we have in this country and how to deal with them, it becomes very, very hard. So I take hope that if I'm able to change one mind with the work that I do, that I have done my job. And that's how I give myself optimism and hope.
आपने सवाल पूछना है अभी भी या please one final last question here, please.
Dr. Kazan Bozai with Institute of Business Management. One of the things that I have learned today, of the many things, is the reaffirmation of the concept or the mindset of abundance of resources. Having lived overseas in the US for the past 3 decades, I noticed that is a mindset that is prevalent in the developed countries. Coming back to Pakistan, I realized that this is a significant challenge. Knowing very well that you have such a wonderful grip on the powerful media, is it on your list of things to do to address how to create the mindset of abundance in our society?
To be honest, I have not given that much thought, so it would be hard for me to answer that. It's maybe, perhaps you and I could have a discussion afterwards, and I could be lured into thinking about that. But I have not had time to think about something like that. I've been very focused on issues that I feel are absolutely burning right now, and maybe that's something that I can look into.
Right, Ji. Thank you very much. You indeed are a great storyteller. I could go on and on, but I will just augment that and leave a request with you, because you know this subject very well. There are lots of good things happening in Pakistan. There are lots of positive stories in Pakistan. You know, if you could help us, the business group, the media, you know, create a film which sells Pakistan, the image of Pakistan. You know, that would be in a positive. There's a lot of positive things in the country, mashallah. That's why we are all flourishing.
So I encourage you, when you leave here, to go and watch the virtual reality films, because they'll make you proud to be Pakistani.
Mashallah. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Sharmeen. Thank you.
Thank you.